It's supposed to rain for the next week or so, so I thought I'd make this video outside, and I'm sort of regretting that now because, for one, it's cold, and there are a lot of birds out here making all kinds of noise. So if you can hear a lot of birds in the background, I don't know. Okay, so today I want to talk about this guy right here. This is the Fujifilm X-T5, and I've had it for a few weeks on loan from Fujifilm for review. Just some disclaimers right off the bat. I was provided this camera for review by Fujifilm. I don't get to keep the camera, I'm sending it back. Fujifilm's not paying me for this review in any way other than the loan of the gear. So you're gonna get my honest opinion regardless of the gear in my hand here, but just, take that for what it's worth. I didn't pay anything for this, but it's also not mine. So I'm gonna tell you what I really think about it. So the X-T5 is something that I've been waiting for a long time. The form factor is a return to the Fujifilm X series roots. And when I say that, I realize that like the X-T1 wasn't the first X series camera. And when you think of X series cameras, maybe this isn't the body you think of right away. For me, it's the X Pro bodies. They're the ones I think of most, but this was always the flagship. The XT single digit line was always the flagship line. All right, I had to relocate. Didn't like that spot. So for me, the XT line, the XT single digit line has always been the flagship camera of the Fujifilm X series. I don't think that's the case anymore, and that's totally fine. I think that the XH2 and the XH2S are the top tier Fujifilm X series cameras that you can buy right now. They sort of offer a similar experience to this, especially is it the XH2 that has the 40 megapixel sensor? I always get them reversed, but essentially whichever one of those two has the 40 megapixel sensor. It's incredibly similar to this camera specs wise, but this body is very much a return to the XT1, XT2 generation of this line, and I think that's great. I think the X-T3 and especially the X-T4 really got away from what this was supposed to be, and that is a photography first camera. So we've got all of our dials back the way we want them. We've got the classic funky XT screen that tilts for low down shooting in this direction, and it also tilts like this and like this. It doesn't face forward, which is fine. We don't need a forward-facing screen on a camera like this. It does have all the video functionality of the flagship Fujifilm cameras. It's got F-Log. It shoots, I don't know, all kinds of crazy resolutions. I'll maybe put here, you know what? It doesn't matter. You can look up the resolution. All I know is that it has fantastic in-body image stabilization, and the video files look great coming out of this camera, and everything just works really, really well. So with that in mind, I want to talk about 5 things that I love about this Fujifilm X-T5, but then also 2 things that I don't really love about this camera. You take the good with the bad. Nothing's perfect, and there's always going to be issues. So we'll talk about the 5 good things first, and then I'll circle back and we'll talk about the two things that sort of drive me nuts about this thing. Okay, so the first thing I love about this Fujifilm X-T5 is the new 40 megapixel sensor. 40 megapixels on APS-C, hallelujah. We are finally up there with some bigger full frame stuff. 24, 26 megapixels is great, but having that option, if you're an APS-C shooter, having that higher resolution option is, it's kind of a game changer, to be honest. You can crop quite a bit with these files. With the higher megapixel count, I was worried that it wouldn't be as good in low light as the older generation sensors. It's fine. Yeah, it's totally fine in low light. There is some noise. Every camera has noise in low light. It just depends on how it processes it or how you edit the photos afterwards. But it's very well controlled in this camera, up to very high ISOs. I think I shot it up to 24,000, 26 something thousand ISO, and yeah, it was very well controlled. Okay, the second thing I love about the Fujifilm X-T5, and it's not a new thing with this camera, this is not a new feature, but it's this new battery, the NPW 235. I never got past missing 2 bars. There's 5 bars on the screen when you have a fully charged battery. I never got lower than 3 bars shooting with this thing all day. As somebody who's shot Fujifilm for the better part of a decade, come on, man. It's a helicopter. As somebody who's shot Fujifilm for the better part of a decade, I'm used to having a pocket full of the old NPW 126 batteries with me. You know, you'd go through 2 or 3 of them in a day's worth of shooting, where I haven't even gone through 1 in a day's worth of shooting with this new battery. So it's great to finally have decent battery life in this small Fujifilm X series body. So the third thing I love about the Fujifilm X-T5 is the body, the form factor, the design. It is phenomenal. It is, I have an X-T1, I shoot it all the time, and this is identical to that, other than it's got a joystick, whereas the X-T1 just has the D-pad. But in that design, or in this design, they've put the D-pad back. So it's got a joystick, but it's got the old D-pad, our old friend. This is so much better and easier for navigating around than this joystick. The joystick's fine for moving autofocus points or whatever you want to do. The D-pad, just for navigating through menus and stuff, I'm so happy that it's back on this camera. So the overall design of this camera, the shutter speed, the ISO, the exposure compensation, the D-pad, the dials, the switch to go between movie and stills mode. It's very well thought out. The grip, while not being large like the XH2 and XH2S, is very comfortable, very reminiscent of the XT1, XT2. Just a great overall design that I absolutely love. The fourth thing I love about the Fujifilm X-T5 is this rear screen. So we talked about it earlier, but it's a return to this screen that I always thought was strange until I actually used it. So if you want to shoot down low, but you want to shoot in portrait orientation, it's great. It's such a simple screen. Again, up high, down low shooting, or you can just tuck it back away if you want to use the viewfinder. It was a great screen on the X-T2, and they got away from it on the X-T4. Made that a front-facing screen on this kind of body. It never really fit, so I'm really, really glad that they've gone back to this style of screen for the X-T5. And the fifth thing I love about the Fujifilm X-T5 is the build quality. It feels fantastic. This feels like a very solidly made camera. Metal top and bottom plates, it feels like an incredibly well put together camera. I'm used to shooting with an X-T30, which is more consumer grade than this camera. So the build quality on that, well, being very good. It's not quite as good as this, but this is just a solidly made. It's got a little bit of weight to it too for a smaller camera. Absolutely fantastic. So let's quickly talk about the two things I don't like about this camera before I get blown away or these crows decide they're going to come down here and peck my eyeballs out. So I haven't talked about autofocus on this camera, and it's not bad. The autofocus is actually outstanding on this camera. It's very fast, very accurate. The tracking is very good. Yeah, the eye detection's great. The subject detection autofocus, which is something that's new for me, the X-T30 that I shoot with regularly. Good Lord. The X-T30 that I shoot with regularly, it doesn't have subject detection autofocus, whereas this does. So for me, that's great because I shoot motorsports and wildlife, specifically birds, on a semi-regular basis, and it's got both of those modes. It's got a car mode and it's got a bird mode. So I was able to test the bird mode, and well, it is fantastic at recognizing the subject. 100% of the time when there was a bird in the frame, it was locked onto that bird. There was a little box around the bird and it would track it all over the place. The issue is that the shots that I got when using that mode were very rarely in focus. They were just a little bit off, whether it was focusing on the wrong part of the bird or what. And I was shooting with the XF 100 to 400 as well as the XC 50 to 230. I just wanted to see if it was a lens issue, so I tried a couple of telephoto lenses, had the same result in either situation with the subject detect autofocus. When I turn the subject detect autofocus off and just use regular tracking autofocus, it's a busy street, the results I got were much better. My hit rate was much higher. Again, not 100%, but more than equal to, I would say at least equal to my X-T30, but probably better. Probably 80-90% hit rate, which is really good. But the subject detect autofocus hit rate was very bad. It was very bad. And I don't know if that's like a firmware issue or what, but it's definitely something that I had problems with. So the second thing I don't like about this Fujifilm X-T5, and this one might be a little bit unfair of me because it's not actually something that's even an option on this camera, and I think that's my issue, is the lack of an external battery grip. You don't need it. You don't need the extra batteries. With this new battery, the battery life is more than enough that you don't need that external battery grip. But I almost always have the battery grip on my X-T1 because I do shoot motorsports and wildlife, and a lot of the time I like to shoot portrait orientation, and having that shutter button over here when you're shooting portrait orientation is great. Will they have that for the XH2 and XH2S? I think they do. I think they do. If they don't, they should, but I'm fairly certain they have that for those two cameras. I wish it was available on this camera because, to be really honest, the form factor of those other two cameras doesn't really appeal to me. I don't think that I would be interested in purchasing them. I would be very much interested in purchasing this camera, and I think for the first time in a long time, I'm actually considering upgrading my Fujifilm kit, which I haven't been able to say for years. Like, for years. I've had my X-T30 since it was very first introduced to the market. So for Fujifilm to come along with this camera and sort of take the design back but bring the specs forward, I think was a fantastic decision. So whoever at Fujifilm recognized that this is what the photographer-focused users of their cameras wanted, kudos to whoever made that call, because this camera is, it's not perfect, but it's about as perfect for me as a camera's ever going to get. I don't really use Fujifilm cameras to shoot this style of video, so I don't need that front-facing screen like I have on the Canon that I shoot this stuff with. But as far as a photography-focused hybrid setup goes, this is a really hard camera to beat. Just for overall features, performance, and everything. I think if Fujifilm dials in that subject detect autofocus a little bit better, again, subject detection, fantastic. The actual performance of the autofocus in that mode, not great. Yeah, if they can iron that out, I really wouldn't have anything real to complain about with this camera, because the battery grip thing, that's just sort of something that I would like for the way that I shoot portrait orientation shots. I don't like having my hand like this. I'd rather shoot like this. Again, a very minor thing, but the subject detect autofocus still really bothers me. So yeah, that's been it, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure shooting with these cameras. I'm gonna have a separate review up of this 16mm f2.8 as well as the 50mm f2. No, as well as the 50mm f1. I shot with both of those lenses. I might make it a 2-in-1 lens review because I'm lazy and I just want to make one video. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think about the sort of return of this style of Fujifilm camera to the X-T lineup, whether you're a fan of it going back to its roots a little, or if you would have liked to see more of an X-T4 style evolution. I'd be really interested to hear from you down in the comments. So I look forward to reading those, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.